and that would be good. All right, so let's get this party started. First thing first, let's go over some house rules. You're encouraged to use earphones or headsets while speaking during the session. You will be invited to speak in a Q&A segment after 50 to 60 minutes of the session. We'll have a 10 minutes Q&A. And what our facilitator has informed us is he's going to put time aside for anyone who wants to stay on, because he's the kind of person who is of service to Toastmasters. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone. I will do that by default. I will mute everyone except for the facilitator, because we want to provide as noise-free an environment as possible to enjoy this session. You can find the microphone button at the bottom left of your screen, which you can click on to mute yourself, and then mute yourself later on. Now, although we'd like to see you during the session, if you're having a late supper and early lunch, you're more than welcome to turn your video off. And you can see the video icon just next to the audio icon, and you click on that to turn on and off your video screen. Furthermore, I'm repeating myself here, but the session is being recorded and will be used mainly by the facilitator, and may be used by Royal Roads Toastmasters in their PR campaign, because this session, only this session, is being powered by Royal Roads Toastmasters. And here a big shout out to the current club president, Derek Johnson, who is not with us at the moment. For your information, Royal Roads is a hybrid club. What does that mean? They are a brick and mortar club located in British Columbia in Canada, but they also have online attendance. And you're more than welcome to join them at some point later on. If you want more details from Royal Roads, what they're about, just post me a question in the chat. I'll send you all the details. Now, our facilitator for this session, drum roll. John Nicodemus is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. He has had a varied career both in the US Army and the private sector. He learned his judging skills while obtaining his certification as a regional referee for the United States swimming program. John has been involved with Toastmasters since 2010 and has earned his Distinguished Toastmaster designation in 2017. During his time as a Toastmaster, John noticed very significant variations in the quality of the judging in speech contests, from the club all the way up to the international level of competitions. He has developed a prototype program for the training of judges that has been submitted to Toastmasters International Board of Directors. And that program has yet to be accepted. So before I hand over the floor to Toastmaster John, I'm going to encourage you, if you have any questions, and I think you're going to have quite a few of them, please post your questions in the chat, because on and off, I'll go to the chat and I'll pop the questions to John. So without further ado, please put your hands together to give a rounding applause to John Nicodemus.
Thank you all very much, and thanks for the wonderful introduction. To start with, I want to tell you that what I am presenting today is not officially sanctioned by Toastmasters International. Until they agree with and adopt the proposal that I have sent into them, all of this is unofficial. So what we'll be talking about today is a small portion of a 4-hour training session that I put together for District 18. And that District 18 covers states of Maryland, Delaware, parts of Pennsylvania, parts of Washington, D.C., and parts of West Virginia, all on the East Coast of the United States. So without further ado, let's get started. First question, why should you be a trained judge? And this is something that people don't really understand, only because nobody talks about judging, and nobody talks about how to be a judge, and nobody talks about the importance of having good, solid, trained judges. And that's what this is all about. First and foremost, it's self-development. This is an opportunity for any Toastmaster to acquire more knowledge and skill. If you've ever competed in a contest, do you understand what the judging criteria are for that particular contest? And it's amazing the number of people that don't really understand that. They've never looked at or read the rule book, so they are competing on what they think are the criteria. And I would be willing to bet that for most of you, you do not understand a lot of the criteria for judging a contest. Second, you're going to be providing a valuable service to your club and to your districts and to all your fellow Toastmasters. This is something that you want to send the best qualified speakers to the International Speech Contest. And if your judges are not well trained, then you're not going to be sending perhaps the best speaker to the contest. So you want to make sure that you are sending the best people that you've got in your group to the next level of any speech contest. And then finally, you're going to be enhancing the contest credibility. I know that I have seen in District 18 at the international at the district contest for the International Speech Contest, we have in the past sent less than our best to the International Speech Contest because people were voting for whoever it was they liked. And liking a speech is not any part of the criteria for judging a speech contest. Does anybody just chime in if you've got it? Does anybody understand what the job of judging is?
Right, so I'm going to intervene here. If you are not clear on what the job of judging is, please raise your hand. And yes, the training is 1 hour, 30 minutes long maximum, but you are welcome to stay on if you have more questions. So if you do not, if you're not clear on what judging is, please put in your chat, I'm not clear, I want to know more. Thank you. Over to you, John.
Okay. There's only one job for a judge. Judges are there to pick a winner. That's it. You're not evaluating. You're not doing anything other than picking a winner. That's the sole function of a judge. And it is very, very difficult to do. There are a lot of people within Toastmasters who just don't have the right temperament to be a judge. And that's not a fault. It's no detriment. It's just that you've got to have the proper mindset and be able to shut off all biases and work through all of that to pick a winner. I mean, one of the best speakers that I can think of is probably somebody that everybody in this workshop hates, and that's a guy by the name of Adolf Hitler. I disagree with every single thing the man said, but the way he said it and how he said it got an entire country to do some terrible things. But he was a great speaker. That you cannot deny. You know, you don't have to agree with or even like anything a speaker says to select them as a winner. And we'll talk about this as we go through it. Now, here's what we're going to try to get into in today's workshop. You're going to understand the difference between judging and evaluating a speaker. You're going to recognize and avoid barriers to objectivity. That's huge in this. You're going to understand the judging criteria and learn to use the judging form. Well, not so much to learn to use the judging form in this one, because I don't think we'll have the time. And finally, we're going to familiarize yourself with the rules. And I make this one distinction, that debating contest rules are very, very different than judging a regular speech contest. And there is a separate book on debate rules versus speech contest rules. So judging versus evaluating. In evaluating, you're appraising the speech and you're measuring the speaker performance by the speech objectives, providing feedback and suggestions for improvement. If you're a judge, you're picking the winner. That's it. The best performer in the contest by the objective criteria in the judge's ballot. It is all spelled out in the judge's ballot, and when we go through that, you'll notice liking or disliking the speech has nothing to do with any of it. So you're objective, you're avoiding bias, and you're picking a winner. You're abiding by those contest rules. And all of you, if you haven't already, I encourage you to download the 1990 version of the speech contest rule book. And that has the picture of the last year's winner of the International Speech Contest on the cover. That is the only contest rule book that you should have. When I first started judging, I kept every rule book that came out. And I had the 2014, 2015, 2016. I had all those handbooks in there, but every year they change. So having last year's handbook doesn't help you. You need to have only the latest handbook. Any older handbooks that you have, throw them out. The only one you should be using is the 2019-2020 Judge's Handbook. So let's go into this. Subjective versus objective. You're subjective. You're judging based on your personal feelings and emotions. And as I've said, personal feelings and emotions don't have anything to do with judging. You've got to be able to step out of that and take away your personal feelings and judge each person solely on the criteria that are in the ballot. That's it. So if you're objective, that's all you're doing is looking at that. And some people can't do that. They're not, through no fault of their own, it's just the way their makeup and the way they think, they cannot remove, they can't step out of their personal feelings and emotions. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. It's just that you can't be a judge if you're going to bring your personal emotions into it. And right now, there is no criteria for being a judge that would have any, would allow anybody to be disqualified for bringing their personal feelings and emotions into judging. And that seems to me to be wrong. In swimming, U.S. swimming, in order to be a judge or a referee, you have to be very familiar with all the rules, and you have to recertify every 2 years, and you need to be able to progress up. So it takes practice, and you need to progress up the line, but you have to be using objective rules and criteria. And that's what I've sent in my proposal to Toastmasters International. All right. Now we're going to start to get into the meat of this whole thing. Barriers to objectivity. Being the first or last speaker. Number one barrier to objectivity. And why is that a barrier? Well, when you hear a speech and then you hear a second speech, by the time the second speaker has gotten 2 or 3 minutes into their speech, you will have forgotten most of all the specifics of what you heard from the first speaker. All you'll remember is an impression. It's just the way the human mind works. You don't have a chance to take a speech from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, and so you will start to forget things. And you will forget all the little bits and pieces, and you'll subsequently just remember the impression that you're coming away with from the previous speaker. And specifically at the international speech contest level, for the last 10 years, the overwhelming majority of the winners were either the first speaker or the last speaker. Now that's rather odd, since you've got 5 speakers in between, and you would think that over the years, some of the people in the middle would be the winners. But what we remember is we remember the first speaker and the last speaker. And in our minds, we tend to compare the first speaker and the second speaker. Well, I like the second speaker better. Or I like the first speaker better. And so the second speaker's out of it, and then you go on to the third speaker. Well, by the time you get to the third speaker, you're not going to remember any of the specifics of the first speaker. And so more than likely, either, unless it's very different, you're going to start getting those confused. By the time you get to the sixth speaker, for a lot of people, they will have forgotten the first 5. So they're going to select the sixth speaker or the last speaker just because that's what they remember. And that's obviously not fair. Now in the international contests, all the speakers are not moved out of the room. So they get to, each of the later speakers get to hear the speech from the earlier speakers. And they may pick up a tip or two or even refer to what somebody said in an earlier speech when they're giving their speech. And that gives them a slight edge. So hence the first speaker, because that's the one that in your mind you're judging everybody else against, or the last speaker, tend to be the ones that have won the international speech contest. What that tells me is at the international speech contest level, there isn't enough training of the judges. Typically what they do at the international contest is they will select district directors from various districts around the world to be judges. What that means is if the district directors have never been a judge and are not competent to be a judge, the fact that they're a district director does not automatically qualify them. And so you get people selected to be a judge at the international level that aren't truly qualified to judge. As we just discussed, using the first speaker as a baseline for judging other speakers. If you use the first speaker as the baseline, again, as you go forward, you're not going to remember all the specifics, and you're going to be using your feelings about how you felt about the first speaker's speech to start judging the other speakers. And there is a way to get around that. And I'll touch on it very briefly because we don't have enough time to go through it in great detail. But as you look, if you look at the judge's ballot, and hopefully all of you have downloaded a judge's ballot and taken a look at it, you'll see that you've got slots to give, and you've got areas to look at, and each area has its own criteria. And on the back of the ballot is the specific description of all the criteria for each area. And then it recommends a numerical score based on excellent, good, fair, etc. And you're going to pick a score for that. What you need to do when you're listening to each speaker as they go through their speech, you're going to put a plus for something in the particular area for if you think they did something incredibly well. Say they used vocal variety and it was really terrific, and you're going to put a plus. Or they were sort of a monotone, and in that area you're going to put a minus. Or they used ums, ahs, so's, you knows, all those things, and then you're going to put a minus or a plus. And that's how you're going to do it. And then at the end, you're going to score them based on those pluses and minuses. And what I do is I typically pick a base score of 60%. And then if there are pluses, I'll add to it. If there are minuses, I'll take away from it. And that's my score. And it doesn't matter if you score everybody exactly the same. So if you start everybody at 60% of whatever the max score is, and then either add or subtract from there, and you do that the same way for each speaker, that's going to be very fair. Do
John, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
To give the audience perspective on what you're sharing, I have put a link to the speech contest international speech ballot in the chat. So you're welcome to download it and have a look at it while listening to John. Over to you, sir.
Well, I tell you what, I think I also have, let me find it here. I've got it. I'm opening up the speech contest ballot. And let's see, here we go. And let me share this.
So quick reminder while we're waiting for John to bring up his judging ballot,
I've got
you're
it
more
right
than
here.
welcome to
Yeah.
post your questions in the chat.
So can everybody see that? This is the International Speech Contest ballot. So you've got excellent, very good, good, and fair for speech development. Maximum is 20 points. So you take the 60% of that, and you can go through each one of these. And you can see the second page on the back, speech development. It explains exactly what that is. So before the contest, you read that, and that's what you're comparing. That's what you're judging. That particular speech on. And effectiveness and speech value, and it goes through all of them. So if you pick and it doesn't really matter because you're doing it the same for every single speaker, then you're gonna. I take 60%. Some people do 80%. Some people do 50%. Some people just start them all out at 100% and then grade down from there. I think if you take 60%, you're giving yourself more room to score both ways, up and down. But that's your personal preference. Whatever your personal preference is, make sure you use it exactly the same way for every speaker. And if you will note, another way to avoid comparing speaker to speaker is you see the slot here for speaker number 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10. Put them in reverse order. So your last speaker would go in slot number 1. Next to last would go in slot number 2, etc., and go from there. And then fold the ballot so that all you can see is the scoring piece for the speaker that you're on, and no others. And that way you're just looking at the one person. When you're finally done and you're going to score, you're going to compare the scores and pick the winner, when you unfold it, you should be surprised at, oh, I didn't realize that I scored that one that high. But that is those scores, what you did at that moment, you've got to trust that. And then you've got the actual ballot, first place, second place, third place. I should also note, if you do not sign your ballot and you do not print your name, the ballot is not valid. So keep that in mind as well. And where are we here? There we go. All right. You've got somebody who is on the podium or giving their speech, and they're handicapped. They're in a wheelchair. And we all tend to, I really would like to see, them win. Wonderful. Don't do that. This is very harsh. You've got to put that out of your mind. And did they actually give the speech the way they should have? And were the criteria met or not? And the fact that they're in a wheelchair, or, I know them well and they've lost, at this level 3 years in a row, and I'd love to see them win. None of that matters. It is what it is. And that's where you've got to be very, very objective. And that's why a lot of people who can't do that just shouldn't be a judge. There's no shame in it. It's just they're not there. They just don't have the wherewithal to be a judge. The halo effect or the villain effect. Well, I know this person is a DTM and they're really, really good speaker. So I'm automatically going to give them more of the benefit of the doubt. And if you hear a really good speaker make an error, you might forgive that, whereas with somebody else you wouldn't. That you cannot do. And of course, the villain effect is the exact opposite of that. Boy, I hate this person and I hate everything they're saying. So I'm not going to put them in first place because I just hate them. Neither of those are objective viewpoints, and you have to be objective. When you're working at the club and the higher local levels, having heard the speech 2 or 3 times, it may get old, especially if the speaker does a twist at the end. So it's a surprise for everybody else. Well, you've heard the twist 3 times now, and so it's no longer a surprise to you. That if the audience responds to it and that works, you still have to give them credit for that. That's just the way it is. So if you've heard the speech before, that has no bearing on it. You've got to be able to determine if this is effective in this particular speech. And perception of the speaker from past performance is also part of the villain or halo effect, or having heard the speech before. If this speaker is always a good speaker or this speaker is always a poor speaker, then I'm not gonna give them the full credit. And I've actually had this happen to me where I had a speaker and he was 6 months into Toastmasters. And I had heard his first few speeches at the club level, and he was not really good. Well, apparently he got some coaching. And when he came into the contest, he was phenomenal. And that happens. The passion seems to come out for some people, especially if their subject matter is something that they're really, truly passionate about. And so that your past perception has nothing to do with it. It's how did they do in this speech today? That's it. What they have done before or not doesn't matter. speaker not conforming to the norms. And it's normal for speakers, especially at the international level, to wear business or business casual clothing. Or maybe they'll wear something ethnic garb from their homeland. And that's very typical. But not everybody does that. Whether they're wearing a suit or blue jeans doesn't matter in terms of how you're grading the speech. So if they're not conforming to the norms that you would expect, if their speech still meets all the criteria, you've got to score them high. How they dress and how they act, if it's not typical, doesn't matter. It's only you're grading the speech and the speech contents. That's it. And obviously your personal beliefs and prejudices. If I am, when I referenced Adolf Hitler. Well, I obviously don't like any of the things that Adolf Hitler espoused. Nevertheless, I acknowledge his strong ability to mesmerize and get a crowd on his side and excited and focused on what he was saying. Those are the traits of a great speaker. Whether I agree with anything he said or not, doesn't matter. It is all about what he said and how he said it and how the audience responds. And again, obviously, unfamiliarity with contest rules and judging criteria. And I think that is the biggest single barrier that most judges face. So you need to take the time to, one, read the rule books, two, read the ballot before the contest starts so you understand what areas each item that you find either plus or minus being scored, and then picking the correct score.
Toastmaster John,
Yes.
just to give you a heads up, we are now just past the half an hour mark.
Okay.
And I've got a few questions coming. Can I set you free of the questions?
Sure.
All right. So the first question is just for you to just have a quick recap. Should we have a baseline with the first speaker as the baseline or not? So that's the first question.
Again, you do not use the first speaker as a baseline. Each speaker, you've got to grade them on their own, and that's why when I judge, I pick 60% of the score as my baseline for each speaker. And then I score them based on the pluses and minuses that I've recorded for each area for that particular speaker. I grade them up or down from there. And when you do that and then fold the ballot so that you've got the next speaker up there and only the next speaker, then you're not going to bias yourself based on the first score. So each one is scored exactly the same. Your baseline is exactly the same for every speaker. And you're not going to compare one speaker to another. Because once you start doing that, you're going to start going back to the very first barrier to objectivity, picking the first or last speaker.
All right, thank you. The second question is related to the first one, so please bear with me here.
Mhm.
I think it's important that the audience is clear on this. So, if a judge can recall bits of the first speech, is it a bad idea to use the first speech as reference for baseline? Because
Yeah.
sometimes it can be used as baseline to ascertain whether speeches were better than the first one. So at the end, the judge considers all speeches before finalizing the ranks 1, 2, and 3. So
Again, you can't, because the human memory, short-term memory is incomplete. If you start comparing one speaker to another speaker, you're setting yourself up to misremember or even confuse what speaker 1 or 3 said. Well, as I know, was one of the early speakers, but I'm not sure which one. I think it was speaker number 2. So, okay, this speaker is better or worse than speaker number 2.
all right,
But your memory of exactly what was said and the specific criteria is going to start fading very, very quickly.
all right. Last question. How can a judge mark effectively, and should a judge mark based on the audience interception or interpretation level? I think that means should a judge pay attention to how the audience is also receiving the speech, if it's entertaining, if there's drama to it? So should the judge take that into account?
The judge should take that into account. That's how the audience reaction is part of the criteria. And as we get into this next part of the workshop, you'll understand that a little bit better.
Thank you, sir. Please proceed.
Okay. Basically, what you've got here is when you look at all the criteria, 50% of the criteria is the content of the speech. 20% of it is the use of language or the effective use of language. And 30% of the speech is your delivery, vocal variety, and those types of things for a more effective delivery. So literally only half of the speech that you're judging, only half of it is about the content. The other half is the language and the delivery. I find that fascinating, because that's when I start talking about how effective a speaker you are and whether or not you're worthy of winning a speech contest. Only half of it is the content of your speech. The rest of it is the nonverbal or how you presented it. So in terms of content, you've got speech development, that's 20%. Effectiveness is 15%. And speech value is 15%. And there are definitions on the back of the International Speech Ballot for speech development and what goes into that, for effectiveness and what goes into that, and speech value and what goes into that. So you need to be familiar with those before the speech starts, which means you need to read the ballot and refresh your memory before the speech on what goes into each of those areas. And then we come over to the other side and you've got language. All right, was it used correctly? And was the language appropriate? Were they using slang terms that were inappropriate for speech? That's not to say that using slang is not allowed. It is allowed if it is appropriate to the speech. So you've got to look at it in the context of the speech. And was it appropriate? Did it add to the effectiveness of the speech, or did it take away from the effectiveness of the speech? And judges can absolutely disagree with each other about whether or not language was appropriate or not appropriate. And that's fine. That's why we have judges. Everybody makes their own determination. And then what goes into delivery is manner, voice, and physical movement. And again, everybody thinks you've got to go from one end of the dais to the other and use the entire speech area for your speech. Not necessarily. I've actually had people tell me in workshops where we showed the actual speeches and we practiced on grading those speeches, that some people say, well, geez, they were just moving around so much I couldn't focus on what they were saying. And so they would downgrade them for the physical part. And other people would say, oh, I thought that added so much. And they're both right depending on their point of view. That's why we have judges. So there can be wild variations, very valid variations between judges. That's why we have a number of judges. So the more judges you have, the more those variations kind of even out. But this is, it's half of what you've got in here is what you say, and half of your speech is how you say it. And both are important. Now, this is what I have part of my proposal to District 18. Judges and tie-breaking judges for area contest and above must have earned a CC, a CL, or a Pathways Level 1 certificate, as well as the competent judge designation. In other words, they've been to a training session and successfully competed the online Toastmaster contest tutorials within 12 months of the date contest being judged. I recommend that all judges and all chief judges, including me, go online and complete the online TI contest tutorials within 12 months of a contest being judged. And that's what we are trying to adhere to in District 18 for all our judges. Right now, for international contests, the international speech contest, the only requirement is you have to have a, I think it's a bronze, communicator bronze, or a pathway level 2, and have judged at least one club contest. It's the only requirements for an international judge. In my opinion, that's not enough. Training needs to happen and happen routinely. And so what we are requiring in District 18 is at least completing the online tutorial, speech contest tutorials within 12 months of the contest being judged. It used to be that when you took the tutorials, there were quizzes at the end and you got a score. They don't do that anymore, but at least complete the tutorials. And the more times you go through the tutorials, the more familiar you are with the contest, because these tutorials are almost all directed for judges. And the more times you go through this, the more effective you will be.
Toastmaster John, before you proceed, I've started to display the timing lights in my background, so do refer to them as you go on. Thank you so much.
And here are the rule book that should say 2019. This is the new rule book. That's the URL for that. And down below, you'll see the URL for the speech contest tutorials. And what I personally do is I will read the rule book and I will take the tutorials. I do it within a month of the first time I'm asked to be a judge or a chief judge. Because these are, everybody forgets or everybody misremembers what they think they saw in the rule book, and refreshing yourself is vital. That is absolutely instrumental in moving this whole thing forward. Now, what I've done in addition to this is I have in District 18, I have videos that were taken of the District 18 International Speech Contest from 2015. And I selected what I felt were the 3 best speakers in that particular contest. And the reason I went to the 2015 District 18 contest is because only one of the 3 best speakers, in my opinion, even made it to the podium, and only placed 3rd. The other 2 didn't even place. And the person that was selected was certainly at least the 4th best speaker, in my opinion. And that was who went to the International Speech Contest. And that is a shame. But we went through that, and that's where you start getting really focused on how all of this works. Because what we do is we go through a practice session and we grade all 3, and then we start discussing, first of all, I'll have them hand in their ballots, and we will pick a winner from just those 3. And then we have a discussion on why did we pick this person over that person, and people start bringing up individual things, and the interactive discussion is most valuable because you start seeing things that other people may or may not have seen or didn't place the kind of importance on it that you placed. And that's all fine. So everybody starts to understand what the range of judging is all about. And they also understand why somebody picked something different than what you picked. And in doing this, I think we had all 3 contestants selected as number 1 in a different different workshop sessions. And that's what this is all about. It is, you've got to be objective, but within that, what you emphasize and how you emphasize it in your scoring is up to you. Now, note that in that international ballot, all of those individual scores, nobody ever sees those except you. The only thing that anybody sees is the actual ballot down at the bottom, which shows who you selected first, second, and third. That's what the chief judge sees. Nobody sees your score. So those you take home with you and destroy. One other final thing, you should not talk to any contestant about how you scored them or why you scored them the way you scored them. You do not talk to the contestants. All you do is pick a winner and leave. So with that, you've just completed your first judges training workshop. And I would welcome any and all questions and comments.
First of all, let's give Toastmaster John Nicodemus a big round of applause. Please unmute yourself. I'm going to unmute everyone right now. And thank you so much, sir. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mute everyone again. Mute all. And I'm going to unmute Mr. John. And I've got a second list of questions coming your way, sir. Are you good?
Yep.
All right. So we have the next question. How do you allocate or set up the 60% or the 60 percentile marks baseline on judging criteria?
You take, well, let me call up the, I was going to call up the scoring thing again. Oh, there we go. You take 60% of the total score. So for speech development, it's 20 points, 60% of that, effectiveness 15, and they don't have to be exact, but round numbers. And that's your baseline for any individual speaker. And then you'll put a plus or minus in the box under that particular criteria anytime you see something. And you can do it if you want, make it easy for yourself. Go good, very good. And you take it, so the baseline would be, say 13 and a half suggested point value for speech development. And then they do things really well, then you add to that figure. And if they do things that you thought were not good, you put a minus, and that takes away from that figure. And so you score them appropriately. And you do that for every single one. So you can take 50, 60, some people do 80, it doesn't matter. What matters is you do the same for each speaker. That's all that matters. So that your scores relative to each other are based on whatever the starting point is that you picked.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is the following. Can any contestant who has participated in a contest challenge the decision of the judging team or the winner? And if yes, do you have any example of that happening over the last 5 years?
There are protests, and there are rules for the protest. And I'm looking in the rule book because I want to make sure I get it exactly right. But basically what it is, the only people first that can protest are the contestants or the active judges. And they can only protest on whether or not it was original. And we actually had a speaker in a contest who another speaker challenged him, and the challenge was, everything that this person said I saw on a website last week. And so we called the speaker who gave that particular speech in and said, there's been a protest and they're saying you plagiarized from this website. And he said, no, I didn't. I wrote that website. Once that was verified, then the protest was dismissed. But that's what you got to do. But the only people that can protest are either other contestants or voting judges. The chief judge cannot protest. The contest master cannot protest. Only active judges and speakers. Protests must be made prior to announcing the winners. Once the winners have been announced, there is no changing it. It's over and done with.
Thank you, Toastmaster John. So the next question is the following. Is there a judge's deliberation at the end of a contest in an area, a district, or even at international level?
No. Each judge's score and how each judge scores is strictly up to them. They will fill out their ballot, and specifically, you do not want to talk amongst the other judges, because then you're going to start shading your opinions with what was said by another judge. And again, if the other judge is a senior distinguished Toastmaster who you respect and you don't want to challenge, you may start assuming their position rather than your own. That's not the way it works. Each judge makes their own decisions, scores it appropriately, and turns it in, and that's it. There is no discussion between judges, no collaboration.
Thank you, sir. Next question is a bit tricky from my perspective, so I'll set it to you. When referring to your selection of the contest winner, you stated in your opinion that person was most deserving. Does it not all boil down to this? Speech value seems to be a very subjective criterion.
And some of them really are. Some of the criteria, for example, you get speakers who, I must use the entire speaking area and I must use a lot of movements. You're required to use movements that are appropriate. What the judge has got to do is decide whether or not how that speech was delivered was appropriate and enhanced the speech itself. So if you're talking about something very somber, you may not want to make an awful lot of movements around the speaking area. And making movements around the speaking area can detract from the actual speech. And you can look at it either way. It's each judge's individual opinion as to whether or not, whether the vocal variety, all of that, did it enhance the speech or did it detract from the speech? That's your decision to make. And every judge is different. So some of this is it's subjective, but it's subjective only in that you're looking for these specific criteria. So if you look under physical, presentation of a speech part is a responsibility for effective communication, should reinforce the speech, whether profound, sad, humorous, or instructional. Body language should support points through gestures, expression, and body positioning. The speaker makes effective use of and stays within the designated speaking area. So if they go outside the speaking area, you should take away from their score. You want to make sure that, and this is subjective. So in your opinion, if somebody is moving around, frantically moving around the stage, and that, in your opinion, gets in the way of being effective in your speech, then you're going to score them down for that. If you think it enhances their speech, you're going to add to their score based on that.
All right. Thank you, sir. So the next question is a two-part question. The first part is, what happens if there is a tie for one contest segment, and especially for one position in the contest? For example, in prepared speeches contest, there's a tie between the second rank. So that's the first part.
There are no ties in judging. You must pick a winner. You must pick a winner. If you've got two or maybe three people that all scored the same, you're going to have to, again, this is now where you're getting into more subjective criteria as to who you thought was better. But there are, there's no crying in baseball, and there's no ties in Toastmasters. So that's the whole point of this is you are picking a winner. Judges do not record a tie. You must force it one way or the other.
All right. Thank you, sir. So the second part of this question is, wow, the audience is on fire. I'm just getting flooded with questions. All right. Here's the second part to the question. What happens in the case of the need of a tie judge, but the result of the tie judge does not help, as the scores that the tie judge is providing do not match the judging team's scores that the chief judge has? Do the judges need to revote, or does the chief judge decide?
There's specific criteria in the rule book on how to apply the tiebreaker ballot. And I have been a tiebreaker judge in the past, and I have literally wound up picking the winner of the international speech contest for the district, because I was a tiebreaker judge, and my ballot was the one that swung the vote one way or another. So that it does happen, and there are very specific criteria. I have never run into a criteria where, or a contest where after the tiebreakers ballot was applied, that there was still a tie between first, second, and third. I've never seen that. And I think there are specifically they changed the rule last year on how you apply the tiebreaker ballot to the results that you already have. And that ensures that there will not be any ties between first, second, and third.
Right, thank you. Next question is a bit of clarity that a couple of audience members are looking for, especially with the tie, is if there is if the process is as the following: judges vote goes to chief judge, and are judges aware, or should they be aware of the final results, irrespective of whether there is a tie or there is no tie? That's one question.
The judges will be aware of the final results, and that's it. There's no discussion between that there was a tie and a tie had to be broken, or whether or not the tiebreaker judge's ballot was used or not. And as a matter of fact, they should not even know who the tiebreaker judge was. When you do that, you select your judges, and then the chief judge should pick their own tiebreaker judge, and that's handled totally separately.
All right.
What I do when I'm chief judge is when we're collecting the ballots, I usually stand somewhere very close to the tiebreaker judge, and I pick that one up myself.
All right. Again, a repeat of the question, just for clarity. What happens for some reason if the tiebreaker results do not match what the judging team have elected as winners? Do we refer to the rule books, or is there a system?
It's in the rule book. And definitely, if you're going to be a chief judge, you need to read the rule book in great detail before you do your first chief judge. But you apply it. It doesn't matter whether the tiebreaker judge's results are totally different from, totally out of whack with what all the other judges said. You apply the tiebreaker judge's results to just as the rule book says, and there will not be a tie.
Thank you, sir. So I think that that sheds enough light on tiebreaker and judging for that item. Next question is, okay, if there's a protest that is to be made, how is it made? Is it written or just spoken to the chief judge? Or
what I tell my judges is, you're going to score your ballot and fill it out, but you're going to write in great big bold letters next to the contestant that you think violated the rules, and you're going to write protest right next to their name. And then you're going to turn in your ballot. When I see that, I will go call the particular judge up and talk to him about what their protest was. And typically, for a lot of these, you get either plagiarism or the fact that more than 25% of the speech was somebody else's work, even though it was cited. If it takes, according to Toastmasters International, 75% of the speech must be original. And those are typically the two areas where you get protests.
Thank you, sir. Next question is to be taken with a pinch of humor. If it happens, because the chief judge may have had a long day, a long week, a long month, if it happens that the wrong winner is announced, can someone like the ballot counter protest? And is the original counted winner accounted for the winner afterwards?
Well, usually, what happens is the ballot counters will count the ballots and score it, and you have at least 2, if not 3 ballot counters, and they add it all up, and they both agree, and then they write it down. So the chief judge, all the chief judge is doing is carrying the results, and you've got 3 people, the ballot counters are all agreeing on what was scored and written down. So it's not just the chief judge's decision. It is being checked by the ballot counters before it is reported to the contest master. Typically what happens if the wrong person is announced, it's an error on the part of the contest master. If there weren't ballot counters, and that some contests may be run without ballot counters, then yes, it could be an error on the part of the chief judge. If it is found to be an error, then the results will be revised and announced later, either at the contest or after the contest, by electronic means, but it will be corrected.
Thank you, sir. Next question. In the July magazine of Toastmasters International, there is an article on emotional intelligence, EI, in which one judge mentions that the speaker needs to make her cry to get her vote. So there should be some sort of emotional connection between speaker and judge for the vote. Is that not a disadvantage for other contestants?
Yes, it is. And it is, making a person cry, you're applying to their emotional side. And I may have a very, very sad tale to tell, and it makes her cry. But that doesn't necessarily make it a good speech. So that particular criteria, I think that the person who wrote that is incorrect. They should not be doing that.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, Toastmaster John. Next question. For a day long of contest or conference where judges are mentally working from morning till late afternoon, should there be more than one team of judges?
There should be, yes. Now, if you are, for example, in District 18, when we have our contests, and we have a contest in the morning, and then we'll have our other contest in the afternoon. So we'll have a humorous speech contest in the morning and the international speech contest in the afternoon, with plenty of time in between. But if you're going to be going continuously, then you might need to, or think about having a different set of judges for one contest over another. For example, if when you go to international, you got the semifinals and then the finals. And the reason this year they added in the regionals was because they were getting 10, 11, 12 contestants in the semifinals. And quite frankly, the judges doing that get exhausted. And you should be exhausted after you do judging, because you're really, really focused on it. You should be tired. Using your mental capacities that hard for an hour at a stretch, it wears you out. It's, when you run a marathon, you physically get tired. When you use your brain for a long period of time, it makes you tired. It's no different. It's just a different type of strain on your body. But you should be tired. So if you are running contests throughout the day, then you might want to look at having several, 2 or more flights of judges to cover the contest.
Thank you, sir. We have, I think, 3 more questions left. So next one is, outside of training received from International Toastmasters, from Toastmasters International, and especially the online tutorials, how can a judge improve on their own, on their judging performance, but by themselves or working with a club? How can they improve on that?
Working on their own, what they can do is actually keep practicing. In club speech contests, get out a ballot, a judging ballot, and it doesn't matter which one, but let's say just pick the International Speech Contest ballot and practice and score all the speakers. And the more you do it and the more familiar you get with it, the easier it will get for you. And if you start doing that and putting the plus and minuses in, it will become a lot easier for you to score when you actually are in a contest.
Right. Next question is quite a long one. It's actually my question. We have at district levels for districted clubs, judges training. Is there any support, any platform for club members, for Toastmasters from non-districted areas, especially here, the audience? Part of the audience are from Mauritius Toastmasters Club,
Mm-hmm.
part of the audience are from online clubs, and both fall under District U. So what kind of judging training can we expect since we're not districted?
Right now, that it's spotty. There's no formal effort. They do have a judges training handbook, and you can look through that, and they have a PDF. But you need to really seek out other very experienced judges who you respect and help them or get them to help you put together a program. And we need to, I think, put more pressure on Toastmasters International to formalize judges training and require judges training, because it's just I think it will significantly enhance the credibility for both the clubs all the way up to international.
Right. It so happens that we also have with us in the audience one Toastmaster who has been responsible for judges training for Mauritius Toastmasters events for the last, I have no idea how many years, maybe from time of inception. So maybe at the end of the Q&A, if he's still available, I'll unmute him so he can have any specific questions for you. Two more questions. Do judges from international, for international contests, international competition, go through this type of judging training before they go and vote for the top 10 or the world champion?
There is no requirement for that right now. So you will get, as I said, Toastmasters International will tend to pick district leadership to fill the judge's role. And they will also pick a few other people that they know are experienced judges. But there is no requirement for judges training. There's nothing at the international level. And so when they pick these people to be a judge, they may have little or no training and or experience in judging. All they do is meet the criteria. They have their advanced communicator bronze and they have judged at a club contest. And that's the only requirement right now, according to the rule books. That's why I sent in my proposal, because I think that needs to change in order to raise the credibility and improve the quality of judging throughout Toastmasters.
All right, thank you. So while waiting for your proposal to get accepted and then circulated, can Mauritius Toastmasters clubs and online clubs consider preparing their judges and their judging team way ahead of the contest of the conference?
Yes.
And if yes, how can you do that?
Well, you can create your own training program based on this criteria. I would be happy to help. And I would also make sure that you select, you get some speeches recorded so that you can show them in the training workshops. Because I think when you actually put pen to paper and make people score, you get some very significant discussions going about judging, and everybody learns a lot. And a lot of people may learn that they really don't have the temperament to be a judge. And that's not a bad thing or a good thing. It just is. So it's not, it says nothing about the individual and how good a Toastmaster they are. It just, they shouldn't be a judge.
Thank you, sir. Final question. Can the slides that you shared today be made available?
I will make these available to anybody who would like them.
Thank you. So I have your slides already. I'll share the link with the participants afterwards. Like I said a few minutes while, I'm going to unmute Toastmaster Amarnath Boiju. If you have any questions or comments, because Amarnath Boiju has been leading the judging team in Mauritius Toastmasters, and yes, it's quite selfish from my part, but there's a reason for that. We are looking to really empower the judging team from Mauritius. So Amarnath, if you're still there, your microphone is open.
Yes, I am. It's been very interesting training session. And I think that over the years, whilst we have been organizing our contests, we have been using most of what I have heard tonight. So very interesting. The idea of the baseline is quite important as well. So we will use that for the next training session next year. I'm still skeptical about something. It's about, it's more of a question. Should judges be anonymous or not? So if someone can answer this question.
According to the rule book, all judges should be anonymous wherever practical. And it's that wherever practical piece of it that makes it a little bit fuzzy. The problem is that in the course of a contest, typically what will happen is the chief judge will say, okay, all judges, come with me, we're going to meet over here. And everybody watches all the judges walk over with the chief judge and have their meeting. So they tend to know who the judges are. Or at the end of the first contest, when they've all finished their ballot and they hold it up in the air for the ballot counters to collect, if you didn't know who the judges were before, you know when they collect the ballots. So that it shouldn't be announced who the judges are. It shouldn't be listed in the program who the judges are. But by the end of the contest, anybody who cares to find out who the judges are can do so very easily.
Yes, so thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Toastmaster Amarnath. So final thoughts from Toastmaster John. Do you have any last words for the audience here, especially people who are looking forward to get out of the sprinting box and start being effective judges?
Practice as much as you can. Make sure you read the rule book and read the ballots, especially the second page. If you go to the second page of the ballots where all the criteria are, this is what you're judging against and nothing else. If it's not written down here, it's not criteria for being judged. So, and you'll see that there's nothing in here about whether or not you like the speech. All it is was the appropriateness and all of that. Also, Judge's Code of Ethics is on the back. and you want to read that. And if you can't honestly abide by that code of ethics, if you just don't have the wherewithal to avoid biases of any kind, then by all means decline being a judge. And it's no shame, no harm. It's just for some people it's not appropriate. You know, I've had people that judges tell me, oh no, I just got to vote for who I like because I can't do all the rest of this stuff. And that's totally inappropriate. Unfortunately, the only thing I can do about that is when I'm chief judge, I don't select those people as one of my judges. But that's all I can do right now.
Thank you, Toastmaster John. Thank you so much. So please.
I have one more question. Did everybody find this helpful?
I was going to ask that. So if you found this helpful and it was worth your time on a Sunday late afternoon, I've unmuted you, so please go ahead and give a round of applause to our facilitator from District 18.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your patience. Just muting everyone again. And right. So quick vote of thanks. Vote of thanks to first and foremost our facilitator, John Nicodemus from District 18. We're talking about someone who has been chief judge for the whole district. It's something that's worth thinking about and really going back to the answers he has given us on the questions we set and the training that he delivered. Vote of thanks to Toastmaster Kanan Shankara, who's not available to join us tonight or today. He's also from District 18 and he's a member of Royal Roads Toastmasters. It's thanks to him that we have Toastmaster John with us today. And big shout out to Toastmasters Derek Johnson, who is the current club president of Royal Roads, and Royal Roads is powering this educational item for you this Sunday. Now, what's next? Well, Toastmasters John said it. If you want to have an advanced training, if you want to have more information, more sessions on judging, do reach out to him. I think he will be sharing his information, but please funnel all your queries through me, especially if you want to have a 2 or 3 or 4 hour long session online. It's something that can be set up for you as per Toastmaster John's availability. Now, what's next? In August, this is the educational item on judging. We have coming up on 22nd September, Teamwork in Toastmasters. It's going to be another similar session. It's going to happen on 22nd of September. At the same time, you'll be receiving the Eventbrite invite. So please sign up for that when you get it. On this note, I'm going to end the session because guess what? We've been together for 1 hour 34 minutes now, a bit more for those who logged in earlier. I don't know if you saw the time fly by. I didn't see it. And just like a judge, I'm completely wasted now. I'm going to go have dinner. I wish everyone, and I'm going to unmute you if you want to just give a shout out. I'm unmuting everyone. Wish you a good evening and all the best.
Thank you very much, Christian and John, for all the organizing and this workshop was very clear, clarifying also. Yeah.
And I'm stopping the recording.
Well, I thank